Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt for the Remnant Forum. This week, Remnant TV was on the road down in Mexico and had the good fortune of spending some time with some priests of the Fraternity of St. Peter, including Father Jonathan Romanoski, who is in charge of the fraternity's apostolate in Guadalajara, Mexico, which actually is the heart of the land of the Cristeros. So we have a thriving traditional Latin Mass movement down there in the heart of Cristero land. One of the perks of doing what I do is having the opportunity to get to know so many traditionalist priests from all over the world and from all the various traditionalist orders and dioceses, to sort of see them in action, to see what makes them tick, to hear their stories. It's part of what keeps me optimistic, in fact, because one can't help but wonder, where do these young men keep coming from, other than through the grace of God. I know that there are some well-meaning folks out there who are sort of stuck in 1988, and who, when confronted with good news about the expansion of the Fraternity of St. Peter, immediately began firing off responses about how the fraternity betrayed the Society of St. Pius X, Archbishop Lefebvre, how they are sellouts and they're in league with the Freemasons and all of the rest of that sort of thing. Now, this to me is very sad, sticking to 25-year-old talking points, because the truth of the matter is that even if the Fraternity of St. Peter had initially been set up to destroy the Society of St. Pius X, the fact of the matter is it backfired. It didn't work. It never happened. And today we have two fraternities of traditionalist priests who are doing great work in expanding the traditional Latin Mass movement all over the world. We won, and now we're all moving on. Honestly, I wish the naysayers could just meet these young men and see who and what they are, see their devotion to the old Mass, to the kingship of Christ, and to see how many of them actually, ironically enough, revere the memory of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, and long for the day when they can fight side by side with brother priests in the Society of St. Pius X, who, let's face it, in all other ways, are closest to them. You have to see how the native Mexicans, for example, react and flock to a Father Romanoski. Tears in their eyes, great big happy smiles on their faces at seeing young Catholic priests and cassocks offering the old Mass, behaving with such incredible priestly dignity. And seeing that, it makes you feel almost embarrassed, for if these same Mexicans knew that just north of the border, their fellow Catholics are oftentimes blasting away at these same young traditionalist priests for not belonging to this group or that society, or for doing this wrong or not doing that right or whatever. It's just such a shame. No matter where we go to Mass, given where we are in the timeline in history right now, we should be overjoyed that so many young men are serving God and his poor beleaguered church, especially now when so much scandal is associated with the Catholic priesthood. These young men are walking through airports in cassocks. Do you think that's easy right now, given the negative attitude toward priests? I see these young men as a hope of the future, and we here at Remnant TV are just not interested in partisan politics where the traditionalist priesthood is concerned. It's the Mass that matters. And right now, the young men in the Society of St. Pius X, the Fraternity of St. Peter, the Institute of Christ the King, and so many others, are like new missionaries, traveling all over the world, restoring the old faith, setting up traditional Latin Mass centers, planting seeds of Catholic restoration. And we should be happy about that. Are there some disagreements between these various groups? Yes. Are these disagreements serious? Yes, oftentimes they are, but that was always the case. It reminds me of the old joke about the Dominican and the Franciscan who are debating each other one night about, which religious order is more pleasing in the eyes of God. Finally, they decide to ask God himself. So they write it down on a note and place it in a neutral place at the local parish church on the altar. And the next day they return to find a golden plaque on the altar inscribed with words from on high that read, "My sons, be at peace. The sons of St. Dominic and the sons of St. Francis are equally pleasing to the divine Godhead." Signed, God, S.J. This has gone on for a long time. And believe it or not, the situation with the Society of St. Pius X, the canonical situation, will one day be resolved. And as I see it, as lay Catholics, this is the time for us to help tear down the walls that separate the various fraternities in society. Right now, tear them down. Prepare ourselves, prepare our children to withstand the days of darkness and persecution that I believe are coming. It's time to unite the warring tribes of tradition wherever we can against those who hate everything that we believe. I'm convinced persecution is coming, which is why I thank God for young priests such as Father Jonathan Romanoski, who's preparing the way and preparing our children and our souls. But don't take my word for it. Here is Father Romanoski in his own words in a little interview that I conducted with him just a few days ago down in Mexico. Father Romanoski. Okay, Father, for our viewers, first of all, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, we're down here in Mexico for kind of a pre-conference with Eric Frankovich. But I wanted to ask you a few things about, first of all, it's just how did it all get started for you? You were born and raised in Pittsburgh, is that correct?
I was born and raised in Pennsylvania, towards eastern Pennsylvania, near Reading, Pennsylvania, out on a farm which had belonged to my grandfather. And my family was Catholic until I was about 5 years of age. Then when I was 5, we stopped going to the Catholic Church and started going to a Protestant church. So my earliest memories are from a Protestant church and hearing a little bit about the Bible. And so that's how it started. And then so it was a little bit of formation there, and then more formation just from the world and public school. And so, but that took me to a point in my life when I was in high school, and I started to think that, life really doesn't have any meaning. I was just stuck on that question: what does it all mean? I took relativism seriously, and so I was left with that doubt and that existential angst to think, well, if life is meaningless, why should I go on living? Mm-hmm. I was 16 at the time, and that sparked my search for God, a restless heart. So I started to look for God. And eventually, I remember reading about Buddhism at first, thinking, wow, this should be more spiritual rather than religious. And I remember trying to do this meditation and reading the book. And so, well, what's the focus? What's the objective here? And it turns out it's nirvana, which means nothing. so I said, well, I already know nothing. That certainly doesn't fill me. I think I'll open up the Bible. So I laid aside my prejudices, my ignorance, really, and read the New Testament for the first time in my life, really looking for God and reading it as His Word. And by the time I finished the New Testament, I had my vocation. And I was completely converted, and a vocation to follow Christ, to want to be another apostle. But I wasn't Catholic at that point either, so that started the journey. And then when I met a Catholic priest, by divine providence, his example, knowing that he had given up everything to follow Christ, mm-hmm. that he had taken vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, I said, that's an apostle. And so at that point I decided, well, I'm going to become a Catholic priest, because that seems the most perfect imitation of the apostolic life and the following of Christ. So I entered, and then I went to a Catholic church nearby, and decided, well, if I'm going to be a Catholic priest, I should go to daily Mass. So everything was happening backwards, but under God's providence. And when I started going to Mass, people started giving me apologetics. Apologetic magazines, good books from the saints, which is really when I started to think, well, what are the differences between Protestants and Catholics, and what are the motives for the Catholic faith? And so, by the grace of God, I read that. I read also a pamphlet of Our Lady of Fatima, which moved me deeply, and at the end of which I made a promise to pray the Rosary every day. And thank goodness it was a Catholic Bible we had in the family as well, which had the devotion to the Rosary and the Way of the Cross. So that started things. And then when I first one day I read in the newspaper about a local Mass in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, when I was at home visiting my family. And there I went to this traditional Latin Mass, which we just had on the first Saturday, Our Lady's first Saturday. And I was very moved by it. I thought, after reading so much apologetics, I thought, here's the expression of our traditional faith. When I saw that we kneel to receive Holy Communion, we receive only on our tongue, and I saw all the expressions of reverence and devotion, which corresponded with all that I was reading in the apologetics against the Protestants. And so then when I went out towards Pittsburgh, then I started to attend the Pittsburgh Latin Mass community there in college, and just fell in love with it, and then started to read more and more about what had happened with the changes. And I was always very grateful for the Remnant and the articles there. Michael Davies, his books, and they were very influential in that time to help me see things with clarity and what's happening and where we are right now.
So, but you're not a traditionalist yet. You just are falling in love gradually with the traditional Mass at St. Boniface. And
Yeah.
did you know at that point that you wanted to be a traditional priest, or was it just I want to be a priest?
I wanted to be a priest at that point, and once I saw the traditional Mass, I said, that's what it means to be a priest. You know? St. Paul explains it in his letter to Hebrews, that every man is chosen from amongst, every priest is chosen from amongst men to offer sacrifice to God. Mm-hmm. And so, although I was obviously it's important, you know, the apostolic ministry of the priest in every respect, but the most essential defining point of the priest is that he offers sacrifice every day. You know, we have priests that are in monasteries that don't have any apostolate with the people, but they're no less priests than a priest in an active apostolate, so they're the most essential thing. And so when I really saw that the priest is the one who goes into the Holy of Holies and offers his divine sacrifice for the salvation of the world, because there's no sermon or apostolate that we can do which compares with the offering and the value of one holy sacrifice of the Mass. So that was the attraction. Once I saw that, I said, I want to be a priest who celebrates this Mass. Mm-hmm. And I contacted the Fraternity of St. Peter, who was also in Pennsylvania at that time, their seminary, and made my retreat with them, and entrusted my vocation to St. Therese too, and many signal graces which were given to confirm that vocation. And at last I was accepted and entered in.
So was with the fraternity, when you entered the Fraternity of St. Peter, did you have any inclination that you'd be down in Mexico, you'd be speaking Spanish, you'd be leading a Spanish apostolate? Did that ever even cross your mind early on?
From a farm in Pennsylvania, no. But of course the patroness of our seminary in the United States is Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it was based on her patronage that we decided to go visit her. And we had now Father Ken Fryer, who was with me at the time in the seminary as a deacon. He had lived there for many years, and so we asked him to take us. He knew how to drive through Mexico City, and let's go. And so we made a pilgrimage, and I just fell in love with the culture there. And after that first visit, then I decided, well, I should try to study Spanish. I'd like to go down again, and Spanish would be very useful too in the United States to help save souls who are Spanish-speaking, you know, and for the Protestants get them too. So. But I really fell in love with the culture and everything that I saw there, what remains of, let's say, Christendom amongst the people. Mm-hmm. You know, that their shout of "Long live Christ the King, Viva Cristo Rey," that was something which still resonates in their hearts and their devotion. And as someone born and raised in the United States, to see how it was culturally manifested, and still is down there. For instance, some of my favorite anecdotes are to see the public expression of faith. For example, when they have the Feast of Our Lady of Zapopan, the patroness of the diocese, there's sometimes up to 1 million people that come in procession. Wow. On the 12th of October, like a 5-mile pilgrimage from the cathedral to the basilica. And so the public expression of faith. In our parish, we try to do many processions as well for Corpus Christi, for Our Lady of the Pillar, who's the patroness of our church down there. And you know, just you'll see pictures of our Lord, of Our Lady in buses, wherever you are in public places. Mm-hmm. And one day they called me too. They were going to open a new Sam's Club. Mm-hmm. And they wanted me to give the blessing on the opening day. So they had the head honcho there from another city, and you know, probably 400 workers or so. And first thing I told them was, I'm so grateful to receive this invitation, because I know it's not for me, but it's for Christ. And I said, I never would have received this invitation in the land of Sam, you know. So, you know, and I told them about the importance of it, and then consecrating their daily works to our Lord, Our Lady, and to imitate the Holy Family of Nazareth. And so, all right, everybody kneel now, I'm going to give you a blessing. And then I went through and blessed the whole Sam's Club. So those kind of opportunities and openings where the faith is still public, and that's what it means, long live Christ the King. They were saying that Christ is not an opinion. He cannot be treated as an opinion. He's God, and he's publicly manifested this by his miracles, by his prophecies. And everybody's, including the government, is subject to him, and we have to recognize him in the public forum as well.
So you're basically in the heart of Cristero land right now in Guadalajara. Does the spirit of the Cristeros still pervade where you are?
Well, you can see it first off in the number of vocations. Of course, Guadalajara is a city of about 6 million people, and it's located within the state of Jalisco. So from Jalisco, which includes many smaller towns as well, they have 25 canonized saints. And there's many more who could be canonized because the persecution was very bloody and very ruthless. And as as Tertullian said, the blood of martyrs is the seed of the faith. And so in the Archdiocese of Guadalajara, they still have over 1,000 seminarians who begin their seminary formation from 12 years on. And they ordain an average of 40 priests every year still. And so it's the largest in comparison. I think the second largest place is Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, which has around 300 seminarians. So it's 3 times or 4 times bigger. The Archdiocese of Guadalajara and their vocations. And a lot of when I speak with those young seminarians, they're of course coming in inspired by the example oftentimes of the Cristeros who are from their little town where they were. So they have so many examples of sanctity which are still a living memory. That generation's now passing away, but yeah, it's still, and so it's the harvest is ripe. What we're trying to do now is buy a house and start a house of formation within the church we have downtown of Our Lady of the Pillar. It's a beautiful historic church, but it's also the downtown is sort of eroded away morally, so people don't live there anymore. There's lots of bars and discotheques and everything. So so we don't have a place really to attend our people. Say we have a mass there, so we're going to. The plan is to buy this house of formation, where we can attend our people with classes, and then start a house of discernment, and hopefully a future seminary. So we have a house that's close by, and it's very big. Belongs to a religious community. It has a chapel and everything. So we're hoping to make a move on that soon, and counting on your help and your prayers.
I wonder, just to encourage people to see that this is not a pie-in-the-sky venture that you're involved with spiritually. We've seen it just in this past week down here in Mexico, the devotion of the people, the devotion to a priest, dressed as you are. It's so encouraging. I think sometimes people in the United States, where a lot of money is that could help, or apostolates like yours, they feel like, well, there's no point down in Mexico. The Masons have taken over. It's socialist. It's just a mess down there. And yet what I've seen, just seeing you interact with the people here in Mexico, is great source for hope, because they are so docile. They are so willing to do what the priests tell them to do. If the priests would just come back and begin to really assert the Catholic faith again. Isn't that correct?
It's very true. It's very true. I mean, they are sheep and they follow the priests. And so it really depends on good holy priests, which is why we really want to get this project going, to have a future house of formation, a future seminary. There's no other place which has so many vocations like Guadalajara, and the potential then to expand through all of Latin America. And that's generally what I found in my visits through different places in South America as well, that the socialist Masonic governments are just destroying the country still, but at the same time the people don't identify with that. I think they still have a deep faith. They're just living in two worlds, and they're sort of confused. But one incident, I remember even with criminals, one day I was turning towards the church, and it was near sort of where the train passes by, and these guys were breaking off the side view mirrors of his car, go sell them at the pawn shop or something. And so 3 young men or something, and I thought, well, I'm always preaching against being a coward and you have to be courageous, and I said, well, I have to do something. So I jumped out and approached them, yelled at them. They got into their car, and as I got closer, I still didn't know what I was going to do or what they were going to do, but I said, no, this is a sin. What are you doing? This is wrong. And they look at each other and they look at me. I say, oh, sorry, Father. And they hand me the side view mirrors.
So you have to go sell
and
it to
take
the pawn
off
shop.
reverse. Yeah, well then I didn't know what to do, so I threw it in my trunk and went over to the restaurants there and asked who had a car, and we found the owner, and he was very grateful. And he was very grateful because I was wearing my cassock,
Yeah.
But without my cassock, then who knows what they would have done? They would have attacked me or something. But even the respect amongst criminals, to see the figure of the priest and that sacred, and so there's so much you can do down there, and they invite me as well to 2 or 3 different television stations, as well as 2 different radio stations, And it's amazing, they because it's broadcast through the whole country and even other countries, Merivisión and El Sembrador. And so I take any opportunity I can get to preach unto the ends of the earth. But the message, how I can present it too, everything's become so politically correct in the United States, but there I usually always mention the sins which cry to heaven for vengeance, something against sodomy, something against the Masons, something in defense of Christ the King. We've done a few programs on the traditional Mass as well. And the people, and against the sects, always against the Protestants and the heretics down there. The people will still refer to these different Protestant groups as sects. They have no ecumenical bone in their body really, because 90% of the population is Catholic, so they realize these testigos or the Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, they're coming in to corrupt their faith, to steal their children away from the church, and no Catholic mother's going to be happy that her son doesn't go to Holy Communion and doesn't love the Blessed Virgin Mary. That's the worst nightmare they could think of. So, I really find that they respond very well to that. There are people that are very much, like our Lord says, yes, yes, no, no, and everything else is from the evil one. They understand that perfectly well. They don't like a sales pitch or a muddy down presentation of the faith when a priest, and that's generally the compliments we receive down there. They say, well, the difference is you have this great preaching style of your fraternity because you guys teach in your sermons, explaining the truth as according to our patron St. Thomas Aquinas, and then condemning errors. You have to do it that way, otherwise. And it's a great relief for the people to know how to love God and to know what are the threats against the life of grace in their soul.
Father, I wonder if you could do me a favor. One of the things that we try to do at the Remnant is break down some of the internecine squabblings that are really sort of hog-tying the traditional movement and I think ultimately harming souls. I've known you for a couple of years, and I've spent some time with you down here in Mexico. You actually never bring up, for example, the Society of St. Pius X controversy with the Fraternity of St. Peter. You're a young man, you had to learn Spanish, it took a lot of sacrifice for you to come down here. Could you say something to people back home about the fact that, your motivation is to save souls. It's not to be competitive with anyone else. It's not to undermine anyone else. You're down here as almost like a missionary in a sense for souls. Can you just say something that might help people see the bigger picture involved here?
There's 6 million people in Guadalajara, so there's a lot of work to do. There's the FSSP is present there with a priory. There's also about half a dozen or maybe a dozen independent chapels, sedevacantist and quasi-sedevacantist and ex-SSPX, and so there's really lots of different groups down there saying the traditional Mass. But again, we're all very, very small in comparison with the city of 6 million people. So, wasn't it John Venari who said, if you ask traditionalists to form a firing squad, they form a circle or something. We have our enemies, the world, the flesh, and the devil, and here we are fighting amongst ourselves sometimes. It doesn't make much sense. I think it's, Father, some of our founders had in conferences explaining how difficult it was to make that decision to leave the Society of St. Pius X. But they considered that they were following the same principles that Archbishop Lefebvre told them, that he, like your father, who respected him greatly too, and disagreed with the 88 consecrations, and it was the same position of our founders as well, who said, well, he's making a particular decision in this situation, and we're making another one. It's the same Catholic principles that motivate everybody to defend the Mass of the ages and the faith that never changes.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It was a difficult time, maybe in a sense even more difficult than it is now, and I think it's just so important for everybody to try to do whatever we possibly can to move forward, and stay together, because the folks that really hate Christ are outnumbering us 1,000,000 to 1 right
Exactly, and we have the same principles. The Vatican recognizes that as well. That's why they live to the excommunications. That's why they don't consider them schismatic. Their Bishop Fellez has mentioned the same. They're trying to make decisions according to the changing circumstances that present themselves. Sure. So it's the same Catholic principles, and they're still obviously they want the society to have a normal jurisdiction, as every Catholic priest wants. And Romanian talks about that point, and the Vatican recognizes them as Catholics as well. And the clergy are in an irregular canonical situation, but they're working on that too, because it's the same Catholic faith.
Sure, sure. Father, last question. One of the reasons I wanted to interview you was because I think that there just has to be a target-rich environment in terms of Hispanics, Latinos in our country, and obviously down here in Mexico. I think there's such great potential, and so I would love to find a way to let our viewers and readers of the Remnant understand how important it is, the work that you're doing, and how they can support you. Specifically, what could they do besides just reading up a little bit more about what you're doing, or is there a website or some place that they can actually send money down?
We do have a website, and if I think the easiest way, it's FSSPmexico.mx, or if you just go via Google and put in FSSP Mexico, the first hit that comes up is a reference to our Facebook page, which has tons of pictures. Or if you go directly to the website too, we always put up all the sermons on both the Facebook page and the official webpage of FSSPmexico.mx. And also on YouTube, if you put FSSP Mexico YouTube, you'll see the first video is one for this project we have for this House of Formation, this pastoral house to be able to attend people and to start a future House of Formation, a future seminary, God willing. And that's and that has the indications of how people can help, and word from our Superior General, who's very enthused about the project as well. For those who live in the United States, they can donate directly to the District House in Elmhurst, near Scranton, Pennsylvania, just earmarking their donation for the Guadalajara or the House project of Guadalajara. Would be sufficient, and we're very grateful for that help, because there's so much you can do, and especially using the internet, and as you well know, there's so much that you can do to touch people, and so one of the projects will be to put all these, we put up all the sermons, and we put up classes that we have on YouTube as well, of spirituality, of doctrine, apologetics, and that really helps a lot of people, and I'm always amazed, so people had written me from Spain, saying, wow, these are really helping us here in my formation. I think, here I am, a gringo, living in Mexico, trying to speak Spanish, and the mother country of Spain, which evangelized all of Latin America, here they are thanking me for my sermons, which are helping them so much.
Isn't that amazing?
Wow, how is this
God
possible? But I hear from people all over, and all through Mexico, wherever we go. I think it's happened 2 or 3 times when we're visiting here, that people come up and say, oh, Father, I watch you on the television. Kind of stick out, I guess, but the people are just very grateful, and it just gives me great satisfaction. I think, wow, we can preach to the ends of the earth via these means, and souls are being saved and being helped to grow in holiness.
So obviously, if I said this is the last question, but I got one final for you. You're not discouraged. There's a lot of things going wrong, let's be honest, in Rome and all around in the church today. But I don't sense in you a sense of despair or discouragement. You seem to be just powering forward and undiscouraged by.
Well, St. John says, in his letter, that we have the faith which conquers the world. So we just have to live our faith. We have to take the offensive. We can't. It's always a tactic of the enemy. I was about to explain to the people, the devil. Don't be afraid of the devil. Say he's like a chihuahua. He makes this. He has this loud bark, and he looks terrifying, but it's just a little chihuahua. He really can't hurt you. And that's what St. Teresa would say to you. That I don't understand people who say, "Oh, a demon, a demon." Well, we can say, "God, God," and make him and put him to flight. So we have to have that confidence. We have the faith which conquers the world. God always wants Gideon's army, a smaller army, to show that it's His work. So here we are, few in number. But with the grace of God, all things are possible. So you have to live your faith like that, with a great courage, with a great confidence in God. I think St. Therese, whom I consecrated my priesthood vocation, but how she said when she was little too, that she saw this demon, and this demon was afraid of her because she had this perfect confidence in God, which could never be shaken. So that's the way we need to live our faith. But especially in Latin America, I please ask for your prayers, for your spiritual support, and for your financial support that anybody could give, it would be very much appreciated, because the harvest is very ripe here. And like I said, it's at a crucial moment because they're within two worlds. So, you know, you get a young lady, and she's listening to whatever, her pop music, and dressing like these, you know, cantantes. And then at the same time, she's coming to Mass, you know, faithfully every Sunday, because she's Catholic. So she's within two worlds. And we know that the persecution, I mean, the Masonic persecution wasn't just, it's two steps. And as somebody remarked, he said, if Calles, who was responsible for the persecution of the Cristeros and assassination of so many priests, if he was alive today, he wouldn't use a pistol. He would use a television. He would use the medias, because it's well known, you know, that it's the sins of the flesh which extinguish the light of faith in the heart of man. As St. Thomas tells us, Our Lady Good Success prophesied as well. And so that's their tactic now, is corruption, 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 because they have the media. Well, we have media as well, so let's go, you know, and the truth is, you know, evil is the absence of good. It's nothing. So you just have to look it in the eye and stare it down and preach the faith, and just to think of all of our antepasados, of all of our forefathers in the faith, those who came from Spain and encountered a land which was completely pagan and dominated by a very satanic tribe of the Aztecs, who were offering human sacrifice. And, you know, one of the missionaries wrote back and said, we've seen cultures which don't believe in hell, but this culture doesn't believe there's a heaven. It's that dark, it's that ruined. And so before an empire so pagan, so satanic, and, you know, here they come with Cortez and then all the Catholic missionaries, and they conquer this land for Christ the King. And through all this South America, Central America, Mexico, they create this glory of Christendom, you know, this Catholic America. So if they can do it, we can do it. We started with 12 fishermen, so let's go, you know, preach the faith and pray and confide in God, and everything will be well.
Father, thank you so much for your time. God bless your apostolate. We're going to try to help you with everything that we possibly can.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
God bless you.